That is correct. Under oath, that's what Andy McCabe said. And clearly, from Mr. Gowdy and Mr. Radcliffe and those guys who have done this type of work in the past and our investigators, they've been shocked at this FISA from the beginning when we first laid eyes onto it because of just the fact that you would use unverified information in the first place. Now, but let's just get past that. Let's just say, okay, that if you believe, like some people in the media are trying to say, which is, no, you actually don't have to verify it. You just have to give the court everything that there is. Right?
Well, wait a minute. If you commit a fraud on the court or you present evidence that you don't know to be true, and you're presenting it as if it is true, as required by the
FISA false evidence
statute itself and by FBI protocol, and you purposely withhold that who paid for the document and only put a little asterisk saying it might have a political taint to it, you're not telling the court the truth. Aren't you perpetrating a fraud upon the court?
Well, look, I believe you are. This is why we called this investigation about FISA abuse. Look, I believe there was a conspiracy here to actually obfuscate that dossier and the information they put in the FISA, so that they actually clouded it so that they could get this through the court. But what's still redacted, is what Comey called the mosaic, and that's why this is so important, because the American public deserves to know, well, what was the rest of the information? And this should tell people a lot, Sean. Why, right when the FISA was released, it was leaked to the New York Times a couple weeks ago. And what was it? What was their first messaging, the narrative that they tried to build right out of that? This proves that Devin Nunes and the House Republicans were liars. Well, that lasted about a whole 12 hours because I said, actually, no.
Just the opposite was true.
Yeah, because it was true. And you also had them saying, well, the really juicy stuff, not only were Nunes and the Republicans lying, the real juicy stuff is in the redacted part. Well, we actually showed a letter. Well, wait a second. We actually asked President Trump to declassify this a couple months ago, and here's the page. Ever since that happened, you do not see anybody in the left. I'm talking about from the Democratic Party to the media, the hard media left, mainstream media left, to the Comey people. They are dead silent. They don't want those pages released. They're hoping that this issue goes away, which is why it's so imperative that President Trump declassify at least these.
This memo is nothing but the distilling, the reducing of thousands of pages of documents provided to us by the department and the Bureau. So there's nothing in this memo that the department is not already aware of. If you think your viewers want to know whether or not the dossier was used in court proceedings, whether or not it was vetted before it was used, whether or not it's ever been vetted, if you are interested in who paid for the dossier, if you're interested in Christopher Steele's relationship with Hillary Clinton and the Democrat National Committee, then yes, you'll want the memo to come out. If you're Adam Schiff, who is consistently wrong when it comes to issues of disclosure, he didn't want us to find out any of this information, Chris. He fought. In fact, GPS went to court. Fusion GPS went to court to keep us from finding out that the Democrats paid for the dossier. So if you're Adam Schiff, of course you don't want the information to come out. You didn't want us to find it in the first place. This memo answers what I think are really legitimate questions, and I do think the FBI should look at it before it is released, and I have provided that counsel to Chairman Nunes, and I think that he has taken that under advisement. So I want to play face-up poker. I want the Bureau to know everything that's in the memo. I think you'll be surprised. It is not a hit piece on the department and the FBI. I would not have participated in it if that's what it was.
Let me pick up on this, because the reports are, and you've kind of indicated that in your answer, that the memo centers on this question of the FISA application, the Department of Justice FBI application in 2016 for a warrant to conduct electronic surveillance against this fellow, then Trump campaign manager Carter Page. Your complaint, according to reports, is that you say that when they made that application, they didn't talk about the role of the Russia dossier, and especially the fact that it was opposition and research paid for by the Clinton campaign. The Democrats, and yes, Adam Schiff is leading the charge, say you're cherry-picking the information. One, that the FISA warrant on it, Carter Page, is not as central as you're making it, and two, that there was a lot more in the application than just the dossier, that the FBI did not rely just on the dossier to get the warrant.
Well, I can't even confirm for you that there is a FISA warrant, and I can't confirm for you who it's on because that is classified, and I'm not going to disseminate classified information. I'll just ask you again, are you interested in whether or not the world's premier law enforcement agency relied on a work product produced, paid for by the Democrat National Committee? Are you interested in whether or not
I guess the question I'm just asking is this, sir. And yes, I can understand you're not going to confirm it, but we're talking about the FISA warrant of Carter Page. Did they rely just on the dossier, or did they rely on a lot of other material?
Well, for me to answer that question is confirmation that there is one. I will. Let me ask you this, Chris. If they relied on it half, is that significant enough for the American people to know? If they relied on it at all, do you want to know that? If you're the judge, do you want to know if a third of what you're providing to the court was paid for by a political opponent? So whether it was relied upon 80% or 20%, do you want to know that the Democrat National Committee paid for material that was never vetted, that was included in a court proceeding? Do you want to know whether or not the primary source in these court proceedings had a bias against one candidate? Do you want to know whether or not he said he'd do anything to keep that candidate from becoming elected?
The big question now for President Trump and the country is whether the revelations in that FISA memo are reason enough to end Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Let's ask former FBI spokesperson John Iannarelli in Minneapolis, and with me here in Washington, David Rifkin, an attorney who served in both the Reagan and Bush 41 administrations. David, I want to start with you. Should this Mueller investigation be ended with what you know now?
I would not say it should be ended, but it certainly is troubling, and if further investigation reveals that there are additional misconduct that led to the Mueller investigation.
Well, this memo.
Very knowledgeable and have always been on target. They said, look, there's been this social media. I mean, the Obamas, for their Christmas photo, posted a photo from 2 years ago. You know, this radio silence from these people that were shooting their mouths off all the time. I mean, the last time Brennan shot his mouth off was, I think, December 20th, where and his last tweet was just ripe with desperation, panic. I mean, just hysteria. I said, you know, these folks have been awfully quiet. I go, is this silence related to what happened, the information that was delivered at the funeral? And the answer I received was yes.
So let me get this straight. Let me get in here with you.
They were incarcerated? No, I don't think they were incarcerated. But I do believe that they are desperate, panicked, and operative word, I think, petrified.
They were put on notice. The jig's up. You're going to be prosecuted, and none of you are safe. I don't care how high your office was. I don't care if you're former president or whatever. You guys are going to be prosecuted, and they're going to go up the line to their higher handlers, to the Rockefellers, the Pacer family, the Rothschilds. I mean, they're going to go all the way up. Are they not?
Yes, I believe that, and that's what's taking so long and why it is so frustrating for everybody. I also believe one other thing. When you watch that video of the funeral service, you'll see that Laura was surprised by the note that was given to her. Not the thing that fell out of a program, but what was handwritten, I believe, by W. And Jeb, as I said, shouldn't be a poker player. He looked like he was going to vomit. But the guy who seemed nervous, but when he was obviously involved in this, in a sense that I believe, from what I understand, W flipped a number of months ago.
Wow, that's news.
And remember,
the day before the funeral.
He flipped to give state's evidence to save himself.
Not just himself. Here's what I believe he did. If you remember the day before the funeral, all of his, W and Laura, just those two, Trump arranged for them to stay at the Blair House across the street from the White House. And they also had another meeting at the White House. Just W.
I forgot about that.
Invited. And I believe that this is where President Trump, if you will, kind of went through, okay, here's what's going to happen at the funeral. Here's what's going to happen. Here's when this is going to happen. Here's when that's going to happen. Here's when this is when you're going to do this. This is when you're going to hand the stuff to Laura. Okay? And I believe several months ago, and remember, it is also my understanding that it wasn't just George H.W. Bush that ran the family business, that Barbara was actively involved in that. Mm-hmm. And remember, she died earlier this year. He's been ill for an extended period of time. And from what I understand, George W. had a point, he had come to a point in his life where he said, look, I can't be involved in this stuff. I've had involvement, but I can no longer be involved in this kind of activities. And I believe he reached out to President Trump and could well have said, look, I will give you information on everything.
Cheney's got to go down.
Across the board. No one's safe.
Cheney's got to go down.
Obama's, Clinton's, all of them. Okay? And when it comes to issues that you and I have discussed, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's the drug trade, whether it's whatever information, I believe he said, I'm coming clean, but this is what I want. I want not just for me, but for my family. And I'll tell you how and a confirmation I have of this. Remember the day after the funeral.
Yep.
Who did President Trump nominate to be his Attorney General designate?
A former Bush AG, is that right?
William Barr.
Yeah, William Barr.
At one point it held the Attorney General position under who? George H.W. Bush. And I believe that part of the deal, and everybody said, we can't figure this out. You know, Trump must be a globalist if he put this Barr in there, who was the Attorney General for a period of time under a globalist George H.W. Bush. This is horrible. Here's why I think that happened, Greg. I think part of the deal that was constructed with W was, look, you hand over all this information, and we go after all these folks, not just the middle-level puppets, including Soros, but all these folks all the way up the food chain, like you're talking about. Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Pacers, Pinkuses, Warburgs, all of them. Okay? But to assure you that we're good on our side of the deal, is we will put in William Barr, who was the Attorney General under your father for a period of time. And Barr, I think ultimately, what he'll do is he will push the Bush family to the side as far as prosecutions. And I believe he'll focus more on the other side of the ledger, that being Clinton's, Obama's, and a lot of these other players.
What about the 9/11 thing? I mean, holy cow. I mean, what about 9/11? I mean, come on. Buildings falling straight down after... Building 7, you can't explain that. So,
yeah. And there was a recent ruling, right, where now, and this was big, that the mainstream media did not touch. And now it's been opened up for another investigation, right?
Yeah, they got it.
And you know, I have, so 9/11.
That's a fraud. I mean, come on, 3,000 people died.
Right. That's the ultimate, that's the bottom line, right? We had at least 3,000 people die.
Correct.
And if you want, one way to look at this, I have a background in construction. My dad built big buildings in Chicago. And it's interesting, when that happened, he was still alive. And I called my mom and dad that day and said, on September 11, 2001, and said, hey, I hear from some sources that there might be some attacks in Chicago. Don't go downtown. And he said, okay. And my dad said, this is after the first plane hit. Actually, yeah, the first plane hit. He goes, I saw what I saw on TV. He goes, but it doesn't make any sense to me. He was a civil engineer. He goes, it doesn't make any sense to me from the civil engineering standpoint. He goes, because I know how that building was constructed. It's an exoskeleton type of structure. He goes, an airplane just doesn't slice through that construct like going into a piece of cheese, okay? Knife into a piece of cheese. He goes, I'm going to make some phone calls. My buddies, architects around the country, fellow construction people, civil engineers. Then the second plane hit. And I called him back, and he said, so I've been on the phone, and none of us can figure any of this out. And he goes, I'll call you back. And then, again, we had the conversation, and now the buildings had fallen. And he said, as much as it did make sense before, after watching those buildings fall on their own footprint, Dave, it really doesn't make any sense. None. From an engineering standpoint. And then, at 5 o'clock, Building 7 fell. And he called me, and he was absolutely, he was pissed. And he said, Dave, you call all those, and I'll leave the words he used out, you call those people you know in Washington, and you find out what was in that Building 7, because you're going to get the answer of why this happened today. He goes, in the history of the world, I can assure you that a structure of that type has never fallen down from a fire. You got it? He goes, that building was brought down. And he goes, I believe it was brought down because that's the real crux of what was going on what happened today.
No, that is okay. Regulation.
Thank you. In testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, you said that you would only fire Special Counsel Mueller for good cause, and that you had not seen any yet. Several months have passed since then. Have you seen good cause to fire Special Counsel Mueller?
No.
Thank you. If you were ordered today to fire Mr. Mueller, what would you do?
So I've explained previously, I would follow the regulation. If there were good cause, I would act. If there were no good cause, I would not.
And you've seen no good cause so far?
Correct.
Thank you.
The special counsel has hired at least 8 attorneys who have direct connections to either the Obama or Clinton campaigns. Don't you think that creates an appearance of impropriety?
I do not believe. I'm not aware of any impropriety. We do have regulations of special counsel subject to all the department's rules and subject to oversight by the department, including the Inspector General. I'm not aware of any violation of those rules by the special counsel employees.
So you don't think it creates the appearance of impropriety?
Well, appearance is to some extent in the eye of the beholder. We apply the department's rules and regulations and make determinations, and we do have career ethics advisors who provide us counsel about that.
Thank you, Mr.
20% of former FBI Chief Robert Mueller covered up Bill and Hillary Clinton selling 20% of the North American uranium reserves to Russia. And in case you didn't get the memo, uranium is needed to make nuclear bombs. After 20 years of being the Clintons' chief political consultant, Dick Morris couldn't take it anymore, and he converted from being a Democrat to a conservative Republican. Dick Morris says Bill Clinton took bribes in the form of $1 million speaking fee in exchange for former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton approving the treasonous sale of uranium, one to Vladimir Putin. And it gets worse. Not only did Robert Mueller refuse to follow up on whistleblower evidence of Russia infiltrating the U.S. by way of the Clintons, but his successor FBI head Robert Comey did the same, looking the other way and refusing to investigate the true collusion with the Russians by the Clinton crime family. So, what the Clintons, Mueller and Comey do to divert attention away from their criminal collusion with the Russians? Simple. They fabricated a story accusing Donald Trump of colluding with the Russians, knowing their friends in the liberal mainstream media would gladly be their echo chamber. Wake up, America. the Clintons are investigated and spend jail time for committing high treason against the United States of America.
After all, the greatest scandal and crime in American history. In fact, it's more fundamental than that. What happened in 2015 and 2016, and then after President Trump's inauguration, was such a disgraceful assault on the U.S. Constitution, the Republic, and its citizenry, that a failure to reveal the truth, expose the criminals involved, and then punish them, risks the crime being repeated. Many of us have known the details for some time and simply want justice. We also know that if the crime is repeated, it's unlikely America can continue as a functioning constitutional republic. President Trump knows this as well. But what else does he know? That the enemies of the republic, while weak, still have a say, which is why he's waiting and why you don't need to worry. Please continue watching to find out the reasons. Trump and Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Trump's strategic mindset is most influenced by Sun Tzu, the ancient Chinese master of strategy. Sun Tzu wrote one of Trump's favorite books, The Art of War. One of Sun Tzu's key rules is that wise generals do not engage the enemy in battle until they know that they have won the war. Remember, Trump knows everything and can prove it. This includes Spygate, Obamagate, the Clinton Foundation, Uranium One, Benghazi, the Iran deal, everything. He has all the evidence to nail Obama, Clinton, and all their cronies to the wall, and he's armed his cannon for firing,
what are you doing?
But not before the time is right.
What's he doing?
But he isn't ready to fire just yet. Trump has had to prepare the terrain first. Remember, since his inauguration, Trump has appointed loyalists to the key agencies that protect the Republic: the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the Supreme Court of the United States, the Senate Judiciary appointments, and other agencies are all led by Trump appointees. The military establishment is also 100% behind Trump. Trump knows that he is close to victory, but has not yet won the war. Why is that? Robert Mueller's special counsel and the fake news media, the last serious enemy holdouts, have yet to be defeated.
This guy's fucking smart.
Trump's assault on the Republic's enemies. Have no fear, the enemies are reeling. Since November 8, 2016, their mission has always been simple: to protect the Clintons, Obama, and all their cronies. They have been subjected to withering fire for 2 years, sustaining massive damage. Consider what we know. Comey's entire FBI team has been wiped out. The same for Lynch's DOJ rat. Obama's NatSec crew, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, etc., has been stripped of security clearances and know they are legally exposed. The Clintons have been under intense DOJ OIG investigations for the Clinton Foundation and Uranium One. Obama has been under intense DOJ OIG investigation for Spygate, the election crime. The leaked network of fake news reporters working with Obama and Clinton have also likely been uncovered. The UK and Australian governments have been muzzled. Democrats in Congress, yes, they have won the House. But once the role of so many of their most powerful members is revealed, it's likely that their victory will be a Pyrrhic. And more. You get the picture. They may whine on Twitter and play games, but Trump has most of the Republic's enemies muzzled or defeated. However, Mueller and fake news remain. They are very weak now, but have one last weapon left. Defeating Mueller and fake news, Trump's strategy. Obama and Clinton destroyed modern journalism by weaponizing it. During the 2016 election, 65 so-called journalists were exposed as covert Clinton partisans working with her campaign as a de facto department of propaganda. The OIG report released in 2018 indicated that reporters were working with corrupt FBI agents to do the same thing. It has been strongly suggested that there is a cadre of propagandists masquerading as reporters who have been secretly paid to do Obama and Clinton's dirty work. The fake news' weapon has always been to use classified information and leaks to damage the opponents of Obama and Clinton. Their ability to influence millions of brainwashed citizens 24/7 is a potent weapon. Trump has known this for a long time. That's why he's hammered the fake news 24/7, 365 since 2015. It's also why since early 2017, Trump and his master spooks have confused and distracted the fake news enemies with real leaks of fake news, while also sealing off any leaks from the most important investigations into Obama and Clinton that have been running in secret. This has had a devastating impact, but Mueller and fake news still have the ability to create and shape narratives working together. For example, right now, Mueller is trying to frame the 4 individuals who will be revealed as targets of the illegal FISAs: Manafort, Flynn, Papadopoulos, and Page, as suspicious liars. This is for fake news to activate later. Mueller is also desperately trying to create a false narrative that the Russians hacked the DNC and then leaked it to WikiLeaks, then waited for the green light by the Trump campaign to release them. Fake news is pushing this lie 24/7. Trump knows exactly what Mueller and fake news are doing. What else does he know? They need fresh meat in the form of information to keep up their assault on Trump. In order to create narratives, Mueller needs access to fresh intelligence. For fake news to do the same, they also need fresh leaks. Trump isn't going to give them either. Can you see why he's holding back? Let's say that Trump releases everything, unredacted, today. Fake news would misreport it and twist it in a way that their zombie-like fans would believe. And Mueller would also be able to come up with the new investigations and narratives to keep his witch hunt alive until 2020. The solution? Release nothing until Mueller is gone. Without Mueller, fake news are deprived of their one last Obama-Clinton holdout. Pressure Mueller to close his investigation and then release everything. The end game. Goodbye, Mr. Mueller. Mueller was probably hoping to try and keep his witch hunt going until the new Congress is sworn in on January 3rd, 2019. That will now be very difficult. Time is against him, and Trump has been turning the screws on him tighter and tighter since the midterm elections for at least these reasons. AAG Whitaker has been appointed and is no friend. He will have already leashed Mueller, if not ordered him to close the investigation. A steady flow of incriminating information against Obama, Clinton, and their cronies is starting to emerge via reporters such as John Solomon. We are seeing the appearance of senior Obama officials forced to testify under oath in Congress. 2 of Mueller's targets, George Papadopoulos and General Flynn, will soon be able to tell their stories with no fear of consequences. We are also learning of major investigations into Spygate and the Clintons that have been kept hidden and under wraps. Mueller's new strategy will likely be to release a damning report that he hopes the House can use to impeach Trump. One problem: Whitaker has the power to block its release. One thing seems certain: Mueller will be closed down, in my opinion, by or near the end of the year, if not sooner. Once that happens, it is endgame for the enemy. Timing and momentum. Once Mueller is gone, it is over for the enemies of the Republic. Trump will know he has already won the war.
But there was enormous breaking news today. When I made the case that I did not believe that the DNC had been hacked by the Russians, in fact, that I did not believe it had been hacked at all, and made the point that the Democratic National Committee had refused to allow the FBI to inspect its servers instead using a paid-for IT firm called CloudStrike, I was corrected by Congressman Jackie Speer of California, who informed me that she now knew that the DNC had, in fact, turned over their servers to the FBI. This was essentially seconded by Congressman Adam Schiff of California. This came to an extraordinary surprise to Trey Gowdy, the Republican from South Carolina. Mr. Gowdy pointed out to his Democratic colleagues that FBI Director James Comey and Homeland Security Secretary Johnson had both testified under oath to the House Intelligence Committee that the FBI had not been allowed to examine the DNC servers. This is a bombshell revelation. Somebody is lying. It is either Congressman Schiff and Congressman Speer, or, of course, it is Mr. Comey and Secretary Johnson. You won't find this or hear it anyplace else other than here at InfoWars.
Welcome back to the Truth Factory. I've made several videos about the mysterious circumstances surrounding the murder of former DNC employee Seth Rich. I think that this is probably the biggest assassination story since JFK. But despite massive public interest into this case, the police investigation seems to be dead in the water. While some may call me a conspiracy theorist for this, as we've recently passed the 2-year anniversary of Seth Rich's death without any arrests made, let me reiterate the details and timeline of this unsolved case and why it's still so mysterious and important to this day. In late 2015, presidential candidate Bernie Sanders sued the DNC for removing his access to crucial voter records. At this point, DNC data analyst Seth Rich started asking questions about voter integrity within the DNC.
Seth Rich with the DNC. I think several of you have spoken about provisional ballots and rejected ballots.
That's Seth.
I guess we've looked at, as an outside practitioner with a vested interest in training our voters, how do we get better access to data that tells us why ballots are rejected, why ballots are cast as provisional, so that we can analyze that and then develop better training guides.
On July 5th, 2016, 1,976 megabytes of data were downloaded from the DNC server. On July 10th, 2016, in Washington, D.C., a police van was broken into and a locked gun box containing several weapons was stolen. Despite a hefty reward for these guns, they've never been found. But a few blocks away that very same night, DNC employee Seth Rich was shot twice in the back and died later at the hospital from his injuries. Nothing was stolen from Seth Rich that night, yet his death was labeled by the police as a botched robbery.
Just this past Sunday, a young man, Seth Rich, who worked for the Democratic National Committee to expand voting rights, was shot and killed in his neighborhood in Washington.
On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks released 19,252 emails which exposed DNC corruption and that they had rigged the primaries in Hillary Clinton's favor. This means that anyone who donated to Bernie Sanders' campaign or believed in democracy was literally and figuratively robbed by Hillary Clinton.
Then party chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz stepped down in July of 2016 after WikiLeaks exposed emails showing a party bias against Sanders. The lawsuit says the DNC server may contain information that proves the claims of bias. The attorney also says the server could help solve the murder of DNC staff member and known Sanders supporter Seth Rich and whether he was involved in leaking DNC emails.
The overriding issue that affected the election that I had any control over, because I had no control over the Russians, was the way that the use of my email account was turned into, the biggest scandal since Lord knows when. This was the biggest nothing burger ever.
The DNC immediately blamed a Russian hacker named Gustafer 2.0, who said that he hacked from Romania. Yet the FBI did not investigate their server, and instead the DNC hired a private company called CrowdStrike to investigate this and pin the whole thing on Russia, meaning that no U.S. government entity has run an independent forensic analysis on the DNC server, and they're just taking a third-party source at their word. Which makes us ask the question, where is the DNC server, and why didn't the FBI take possession of it? Deep state? And the Russian hacking narrative doesn't even make sense, because the download speed of the emails was shown to be 22.7 megabytes per second. This speed would have been unattainable in 2016 unless the download was executed locally with a flash drive or similar. It would have been impossible to have a transoceanic transfer to Romania at those speeds, meaning that the DNC couldn't possibly have been hacked, and these emails had to have been leaked from the inside by someone who had access to the DNC's computers. Now, at this time, there were only 2 DNC employees that worked in data, and one of those people was Seth Rich. Now, Seth Rich's parents have tried to shut down the WikiLeaks narrative after Brad Bauman, a professional DNC crisis PR consultant, became the family spokesman. Bauman has claimed that he was doing this job pro bono.
Are you doing this pro bono? I am. You are.
Okay. WikiLeaks put out a $20,000 reward for any information leading to the conviction of Seth Rich's killer. Why would Julian Assange do that if Seth Rich was just a normal DNC employee who died in a botched robbery?
Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material, and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old that works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting? But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
millionaire and famous programmer Kim.com also claimed that Seth Rich was the WikiLeaks source.
It is not Russia that hacked the DNC. It is their very own conduct that an individual was so unhappy with, thought it was so unfair and dishonest and unethical that that person decided, I want the truth to be known. This is how we get the truth. It's people on the inside.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh, on a secret recording, also said through his investigation he knows that Seth Rich was in contact with WikiLeaks.
John plays in the back with a 22 small caliber. This is according to the FBI report. What they find is he makes contact with WikiLeaks. That's in his computer, and he makes contact. WikiLeaks did get the password. He had a Dropbox.
And if that's still not enough for you, a report from a group of graduate students and instructors from the Forensic Psychology Department at George Washington University stated through their investigation that Seth Rich's death did not appear to be a homicide or a robbery gone bad, and that it was most likely committed by a hired killer or a serial murderer, and that the resolution of prosecuting the individuals responsible appeared to be hindered both actively and passively, meaning that this was most likely a hit job and it was seemingly being covered up. At this point, there's almost $500,000 in reward money leading to an arrest. If these were just some low-level thieves or a small gang, you would think that someone would have ratted them out by now to claim that cash. Yet 2 years after his murder, we're still left without any answers. There's no ballistics report, there's no forensic report, there's no toxicology report, there's no body cam or security footage, even though the police were wearing body cams that night, and there's security cameras all down that street. It's basically a cold case at this point. Yet independent investigators are still looking into this, which brings us to earlier this week when Jack Berkman held a conference where a man who claims to be a witness gave his story. Now, Jack Berkman is a bit of an odd character, but the strangest thing about him in the story is that in March, a former investigator he hired to help find Seth Rich's murderer, named Kevin Doherty, shot Berkman and ran him over with an SUV, which is a little suspicious. While many people said that this conference was a shit show, the witness who called in, who went by the codename Luke to protect his identity, claimed to have a military and an intel background. He implied that Kevin Doherty was a plant and that Doherty was a gopher who did the dirty work for Seth Rich's killers. The alleged witness stated that Rich's hitmen included 2 federal agents one who works for the Drug Enforcement Administration, and an officer who works for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. According to the witness, the murderers were bragging to him about getting away with Sethridge's murder. He alleges that they were also closely connected to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein when he was still a U.S. attorney in Baltimore, and that Rosenstein hired and was providing protection for the killers. They allegedly wanted to take out Sethridge because they knew that he had a thumb drive with the emails on them, and they were altering these emails on the DNC server. Of course, changing these types of emails is a federal crime, and Sethridge having a copy of the unaltered original emails put them all at risk. Berkman says to expect new evidence from the witness in the coming weeks.
There was a witness that the D.C. police talked to. I don't want to get into her name. She was a U.S. government employee who was a live witness that night. We don't know what she saw. We don't know what information they took from her. D.C. police have never released this information. We found it out through other sources, but we're continuing to attack this from all sides. And like I say, more from Lucanon soon.
And while the Rosenstein hiring federal agents for this hit is certainly a twist to the story, it would explain the connection to the weapons stolen from the lockbox in the unattended police van that night, and why Berkman was shot by his former employee. And while this narrative debunks other popular theories about Sethridge and of course the Russian hacking narrative, I didn't hear anything in the witness's testimony that straight up contradicts any of the evidence we know. So this theory is plausible, and the interesting thing about Rosenstein possibly being involved is that he's currently overseeing the special counsel's probe into Russian meddling in the 2016 US election. And he's been accused of deliberately stonewalling the Republicans' investigations of possible FBI bias in Hillary Clinton's private server. On Friday, Rosenstein announced charges against 12 Russian intelligence officers for hacking offenses during the 2016 election, and pushed back on allegations that FBI agents are leaking details of the probe to reporters. It's looking like Rosenstein may even be impeached for just being super shady.
They also hacked into the computer networks of a congressional campaign committee and a national political committee. The conspirators created fictitious online personas, including DC Leaks and Lucifer 2.0. And they used those personas to release information, including thousands of stolen emails and other documents, beginning in June of 2016.
If Rosenstein was involved in the murder